Out on the wide frontier, where the land stretched farther than a man could ride in a day, there lived a cowboy people spoke about in low voices. He was taller and bigger than most men, with shoulders like carved stone and hands that looked made for lifting mountains. When he rode into a small town, conversations slowed. Some people stepped aside. Others watched him carefully, unsure of his temper. But the truth was, he rarely spoke and never looked for trouble. He only wanted work, food, and a quiet place to sleep when the sun went down. From a young age, he had learned that his size set him apart. Other boys avoided him, afraid he might hurt them even when he tried to be gentle. Adults treated him like a grown man before he was ready, expecting strength but never asking about his heart. He grew used to being alone. The open land became his friend. The wind, the horses, and the long trails asked nothing from him except honesty and hard work. As the years passed, stories followed him. Some said he had once broken a man's arm with one hand. Others claimed he was born under a bad sign, that he brought misfortune wherever he stayed too long. None of those stories were true, but they spread faster than truth ever could. He did not argue with them. He believed silence was easier than explaining a life no one wanted to understand. Deep inside, he carried a heavier burden than his body ever showed. A traveling doctor, many years before, had told him that because of his unusual build and past injuries, he might never be able to have children. The words had settled into his heart like dust that would never clear. On the frontier, a man's future was often measured by land, family, and children. Without those, he felt unfinished, like a story that would never reach its final page. Because of that belief, he kept people at a distance. He did not stay long in one place. Whenever he felt a sense of belonging starting to grow, he packed up and rode on. He told himself it was better that way, better to leave before someone hoped for more from him than he could give. One season, after months of hard riding, he took work driving cattle through dry land near Apache territory. The desert was harsh, but he knew how to survive. Still, he stayed alert. Tension always lived in those lands, created by years of broken promises and fear on both sides. He respected the land and the people who had lived there long before him. He did not cross sacred areas and never took what was not his. One evening, while checking the edge of the herd, he noticed movement near a line of low hills. His hand rested near his side, but he did not rush forward. From the shadows stepped a woman. She stood tall and calm, her eyes steady and watchful. She was Apache. Her clothing simple but strong, made for survival. There was no fear in her stance, only caution. They looked at each other for a long moment. The desert seemed to hold its breath. He slowly lifted his empty hands, showing he meant no harm. She watched carefully, reading his body language the way people of the land learned to do. Finally, she spoke in a firm but quiet voice, telling him he was near a place her people used for gathering water. He listened closely and nodded. He apologized for the trouble and promised to move the cattle farther away by morning. His voice was low and respectful. She studied his face, perhaps surprised by his calm tone and careful words. After another moment, she nodded and turned back toward the hills, disappearing as silently as she had come. That meeting stayed with him. He had faced danger before, but this was different. There was no anger in her eyes, only strength and awareness. For the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him, something close to curiosity mixed with respect. Over the next few days, he made sure the herd stayed clear of the area she had mentioned. One afternoon, as the heat pressed down heavily, he saw her again near a small stream. She was filling containers, moving with quiet confidence. This time, she noticed him first but did not retreat. Instead, she waited. He stopped a fair distance away and greeted her with a small nod. He offered her water from his own supply, knowing the days had been dry. She hesitated, then accepted. They exchanged few words, but the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It felt steady, like the land itself. She learned his name. He learned hers. Each spoke simply, without asking too much. They talked about the weather, the land, and the challenges of surviving in such a hard place. He did not talk about his past, and she did not press him. That alone made him feel lighter. As days passed, their brief meetings became more common. Always careful. Always respectful. He noticed how she observed the world. How she listened before speaking. She noticed how gentle he was with his horse. How he never wasted food or water. Slowly, the heavy stories he carried about himself began to feel less solid. Yet, every time he felt drawn closer, fear followed. He reminded himself of the truth he believed. That he was not meant to build a family. Not meant to hold on to love. He told himself that getting close would only bring pain to both of them. The land had taught him that some things survived only if left untouched. Still, when he thought of her walking alone across the desert, strong yet human, his heart grew restless. He had lived a life of distance for so long that the idea of connection felt dangerous, but it also felt real, in a way nothing else ever had. One night, as the stars spread across the sky like countless quiet witnesses, he sat by his fire and stared into the flames. He realized that for the first time, his loneliness had a shape and a name. It scared him. But it also reminded him that he was still alive, still capable of feeling more than the weight of his own shadow. The frontier was a hard place, and it did not care about hopes or fears. But as the fire burned low, he understood that his story, long defined by sighs and silence, might be standing at the edge of change. Whether he was ready or not, something had begun quietly, like a step taken in the dark, guided only by trust. The days grew warmer as the cattle drive moved slowly across the land. The cowboy kept his routine steady, waking before sunrise and resting only when the sky turned soft with evening light. Yet his thoughts were no longer as quiet as before. The memory of the Apache woman followed him like a shadow that did not frighten him. He found himself watching the hills more closely. Not out of fear, but out of curiosity and care. She, too, had noticed the change within herself. Life had taught her to stay alert and guarded. She had grown up learning that trust was earned, not given. The land had taken much from her people, and she carried both pride and loss in her heart. Still, when she thought of the large, quiet cowboy, she did not feel the usual tension. There was something steady about him. Something that reminded her of the old ways. Respect, patience, and balance. Their meetings continued. Never planned, yet never surprising. Sometimes it was near the stream, other times along the open path where the desert opened wide. They spoke more with each passing day, though their words remained simple. He talked about the long trails he had ridden, the storms he had faced, and the horses he had cared for. He never made himself sound important. He spoke as a man who had learned through effort, not pride. She shared stories of her people, of how they listened to the land and watched the sky for signs. She spoke of traditions passed down through generations, of songs sung quietly at night, and of strength found in community. When she spoke, he listened closely, never interrupting. This alone made her feel seen and respected. Despite the growing comfort between them, there was always an invisible line neither crossed. They were careful, shaped by the history around them. The world had taught them that closeness could bring danger. Still, they found ways to support each other without breaking trust. One afternoon, he noticed her struggling to carry a heavy load of gathered plants. Without rushing forward, he asked if he could help. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. He lifted the load easily, careful not to damage anything inside. As they walked together, she explained how each plant was used, how nothing was taken without purpose. He admired the care behind every action. As they reached her path, she thanked him. Her voice was calm, but there was warmth in it. He nodded, feeling something settle gently in his chest. It was a feeling he had avoided for years, connection without expectation. Later that evening, trouble found him. A group of rough men from another drive passed near his camp. They had heard stories about the Apache lands and spoke carelessly. With little respect, the cowboy stayed quiet, not wanting conflict. But when one of them mentioned moving cattle through the water source he knew was important, his jaw tightened. He spoke up, firm but controlled, warning them that the land was already strained and that crossing that area would bring problems. They laughed at him, mocking his size and silence. For a moment, the old fear returned that his strength would be misunderstood, but he held back, choosing words over force. When the men rode off, he sat alone, anger and worry mixing inside him. He knew what careless actions could cause. He also knew the woman and her people would suffer first. That night, sleep came slowly. The next day, he sought her out. When he found her near the hills, he told her about the men and their plans. He spoke honestly, without trying to sound like a hero. She listened carefully, her expression serious. After a moment, she thanked him for the warning. She said she would speak to her people and prepare. Her trust in his words meant more to him than he could explain. He had carried the weight of his size like a burden, but now it felt like something that could protect rather than isolate. Still, fear lingered. He worried that his involvement might bring trouble to her. Over the following days, he noticed small changes. He saw Apache watchers along the ridges, alert but calm. He also saw the careless men turn their drive away, choosing an easier path. Relief washed over him, quiet but deep. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in soft colors, the woman approached his camp. This was the first time she had come so close. She stood at the edge of the firelight, respectful of his space. He stood slowly, making sure she felt safe. She thanked him again, not only for the warning, but for the way he had spoken to her with honesty and care. She told him that actions mattered more than words, and his actions had shown respect. That night, they sat by the fire, a careful distance between them. They shared food and silence. The stars above seemed brighter, as if listening. He felt the urge to speak of his past, of the belief that had shaped his life. But fear held him back. He did not want to change the way she looked at him. She sensed the weight he carried. Without pressing, she spoke of loss, of how the future is not always clear, but the present deserves truth. Her words were gentle, not demanding. He felt his chest tighten, emotions pressing close to the surface. For the first time in years, he considered the idea that his life did not have to be defined by what he believed he lacked. He still feared the future, but the present felt real and strong. Sitting there, with the fire warm and the night calm, he realized that trust was growing between them, slow and careful, like roots finding water deep in dry ground. When she rose to leave, she paused and looked at him. There was no promise in her eyes, only understanding. She walked back into the night, and he watched until she disappeared among the shadows. As the fire burned low, he knew something important had changed. Their bond was no longer just chance meetings. It was becoming a shared path, uncertain, but meaningful. The frontier remained harsh and unforgiving. But in that wide, lonely land, two lives were slowly learning how to walk beside each other without fear. The days that followed felt different, as if the land itself had noticed the quiet change between them. The cowboy moved through his work with the same strength and discipline, but inside, his thoughts were fuller. He no longer felt like a shadow passing through places without leaving a mark. Each sunrise brought a sense of expectation, not rushed or demanding, just present. The Apache woman continued her daily tasks, gathering food, checking water paths, and helping her people. Yet even as she worked, she carried awareness of him with her. She did not dream foolish dreams, but she allowed herself to acknowledge what she felt. He was different from the men she had known before. He did not speak to impress or to control. He listened, and when he acted, it was with purpose. They met again near the stream, where the water moved gently over smooth stones. This time, their conversation lasted longer. They spoke about small things at first. He talked about how he learned to read the sky for weather signs. She explained how her people watched birds and wind patterns. They laughed quietly when they realized how similar their methods were. Learned from different lives but guided by the same land. As comfort grew, so did honesty. One afternoon, as they walked along a dry ridge, he shared pieces of his past. He spoke of being judged by his size, of being feared before he was understood. His voice stayed steady, but his eyes carried old weight. She did not interrupt. She simply walked beside him, allowing his words to exist without judgment. She shared her own story in return. She spoke of family members lost to hardship, of moving often to survive, and of the strength required to keep traditions alive in a changing world. Her words were calm, but pain lived beneath them. When she finished, they stood in silence. Not awkward, but respectful of what had been shared. The bond between them deepened, not through big promises, but through shared understanding. He found himself smiling more, noticing the details of the world again. She noticed how his presence brought a sense of safety without taking control. They trusted each other's pace, yet inside him, fear remained. Every time he felt closer, the old belief returned like a warning bell. He told himself that no matter how strong their connection grew, it could not last. He believed he would only disappoint her in the end. That thought caused him to pull back at times, becoming quieter, more distant. She noticed the change. One evening, as the sky turned orange and purple, she asked him gently why he sometimes looked like a man preparing to leave. The question was not accusing. It was honest. He felt his chest tighten. He had avoided this moment for as long as he could. They sat on a flat rock overlooking the land. He stared ahead, gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. He told her about the words spoken to him long ago, about how he believed he could never have children. He explained how that belief had shaped every choice he made, every road he avoided, every connection he ended before it began. As he spoke, shame and fear mixed inside him. He expected pity or distance. Instead, she listened with calm attention. When he finished, she did not speak right away. She looked out at the land, thoughtful. Finally, she told him that life does not always follow the paths people expect. She said that worth is not measured by what a person can pass on, but by how they live, how they treat others, and how they face the world. She reminded him that many forms of family exist, and love is not a contract with guarantees. Her words did not erase his fear, but they softened it. For the first time, he considered that his belief might not be the whole truth of his life. He felt lighter, though uncertain. As weeks passed, their connection became known to others. Some cowboys noticed his frequent trips near the hills. Some Apache elders noticed the way she spoke of him. Careful but open. Reactions were mixed. Some warned her to be cautious. Some warned him to stay away. The past lived strongly in both worlds. Pressure grew, testing their resolve. One day, a small conflict broke out near a trading path. Voices rose, and tension filled the air. He stepped forward calmly, using his presence not to threaten, but to steady the situation. She stood beside him, speaking firmly and clearly. Together, they prevented the moment from becoming something worse. Afterward, they walked away in silence, both shaken but proud. They realized then that standing together brought challenges, but also strength. Neither felt alone anymore. That night, he struggled with his thoughts. He feared that staying close to her would bring danger. He feared that loving her meant risking everything. The old habit of leaving whispered to him. It told him to ride out before things grew harder. Before dawn, he saddled his horse, unsure of his decision. As he prepared to leave, he saw her approaching, as if she had sensed his unrest. She stopped a short distance away and looked at him, her expression calm but serious. She told him she would not ask him to stay or to go. She said each person must choose their own path. But she wanted him to know that whatever he chose, what they shared was real and respected. Her words struck him deeper than any demand could have. He realized that leaving now would not protect her or himself. It would only repeat a pattern that had kept him alone for years. He took a slow breath and unsaddled his horse. That choice did not solve everything. The future remained uncertain, but it marked a turning point. He was no longer running from what he felt. He stayed, not because he believed everything would be easy, but because he believed the connection was worth facing the unknown. From that day on, they walked their path more openly. They did not rush or pretend the world around them was simple. They accepted the challenges as part of their story. The land watched quietly as two people from different lives chose understanding over fear. And in that wide, demanding world, love continued to grow, not loudly, not without struggle but steadily, rooted in respect, honesty, and the courage to stay when leaving felt easier. The season began to change, and with it came heavier challenges. The land that had once felt open and calm now carried tension beneath its beauty. Word spread quickly on the frontier, and people noticed when two lives crossed lines that had existed for a long time. Some watched with curiosity, others with quiet disapproval. The cowboy and the Apache woman both felt it. Even when no one spoke directly, he continued his work with the cattle, but his movements were more thoughtful now. He planned routes carefully, choosing paths that avoided trouble. He understood that his choices no longer affected only himself. She, too, felt the weight of attention. Some from her people questioned her closeness to him, not with anger, but with concern shaped by history. One evening, she spoke openly with an elder she trusted. She explained how the cowboy had shown respect from the beginning, how his actions matched his words. The elder listened carefully and reminded her that wisdom often lives between caution and courage. Trust, the elder said, must walk beside awareness. She took those words to heart. Meanwhile, the cowboy faced his own test. A ranch owner offered him steady work far away, good pay, and safety from the tension building around him. It was the kind of offer he would have accepted without hesitation in the past. That night, he sat alone, turning the choice over in his mind. Leaving would be easy. Staying would mean facing judgment and uncertainty. When he told her about the offer, he expected her to encourage him to go. Instead, she asked him what he truly wanted. The question surprised him. He had spent most of his life doing what seemed necessary, not what felt right. After a long silence, he admitted that he wanted to stay, even though he was afraid. The fear was not only about others. It was about himself. The belief he carried still whispered that he was not meant for lasting bonds, that staying would only lead to disappointment. But he was learning that fear did not disappear by running from it. It only followed. Tension reached a breaking point when a misunderstanding occurred near a shared water source. A group of settlers accused the Apache of blocking access, while the Apache believed their space was being disrespected. Voices rose, and old anger surfaced. The cowboy found himself caught in the middle, not by force, but by connection. He stepped forward carefully, speaking to both sides with the same calm tone. He explained what he had seen, how the water could be shared if handled with respect. Some listened, others were too full of old wounds to hear. For a moment, it seemed the situation might fall apart. The Apache woman stood beside him, her presence steady. She spoke clearly, reminding her people of the cost of conflict. She reminded the settlers that fear often comes from not knowing each other. Her words did not solve everything, but they slowed the moment enough for tempers to cool. Afterward, both of them felt drained. They walked away together, not touching, but close enough to feel support. That night, he struggled with guilt. He worried that his presence was bringing trouble into her life. He told her this honestly, his voice heavy. She listened and then told him something simple but strong. She said that trouble existed long before they met. Choosing understanding did not create it. It only revealed it. Her words did not erase his worry, but they helped him see the situation more clearly. Days later, a harsh storm rolled across the land. The wind was strong, and the rain came fast. He worked hard to secure the cattle. while she and her people protected what they could. When the storm passed, damage remained, fences were down, supplies scattered, and paths washed out. Without being asked, he rode toward the Apache camp to offer help. Some watched him closely, unsure of his intentions. But when he dismounted and began lifting fallen beams and clearing debris, doubt slowly eased. He worked silently, using his strength with care. Others joined him, and for the first time, effort replaced suspicion. She worked beside him, guiding where help was needed most. There were no speeches, no promises, just shared labor under an open sky. By the end of the day, exhaustion replaced tension, people rested, and quiet gratitude settled in. That evening, an elder approached the cowboy. The words were few but meaningful. The elder thanked him for helping without demanding recognition. "Respect," the elder said, "is proven through action." The cowboy nodded, feeling a mix of humility and relief. Despite these moments of progress, the weight of the future pressed on him. He still feared that he would one day fail her. One night, as they walked beneath a sky filled with stars, he spoke again of his doubt. He told her he worried that staying meant holding her back from a life that might be easier without him. She stopped walking and faced him. Her voice was calm but firm. She told him that choosing someone is not about ease. It is about truth. She said she did not need a perfect future, only an honest present. She reminded him that she was not following him blindly. She was choosing him with clear eyes. Those words settled deeply in him. He realized that respect meant trusting her choices, not trying to decide for her. It was a lesson he had never learned before. As the weeks passed, they continued to face quiet resistance and small victories. Some people softened. Others never did. But they learned not to measure their worth by approval. They focused on how they treated each other, how they faced each day. He no longer felt like a man defined only by size or fear. He was still learning, still uncertain. But he was present. She, too, felt changed, not weakened, but strengthened by partnership rather than isolation. The frontier remained unforgiving. The past did not disappear. But together, they had begun to build something steady within the chaos. Not a promise of comfort, but a shared understanding that life, with all its weight, could be faced side by side. And as the land slowly healed from the storm, so did parts of them that had long believed they were meant to stand alone. Time moved forward in its quiet, steady way. The land did not change overnight, and neither did the people living upon it. But small shifts began to appear, like grass pushing through dry soil after rain. The cowboy and the Apache woman continued walking their shared path, not as a grand statement, but as a daily choice made with care. The cowboy took fewer long-distance jobs. Instead, he accepted work closer to the lands they both knew well. He learned the rhythms of the area in a new way, not as a passing rider, but as someone rooted. Each morning, he woke with purpose, not just to earn a living, but to protect the balance he had helped build. The woman continued supporting her people, teaching younger ones what she had learned from elders and from the land itself. She did not abandon her world for him, and he never asked her to. Their lives remained connected yet independent, joined by respect rather than control. People slowly adjusted to their presence together. Some settlers began greeting her with caution instead of fear. Some Apache began acknowledging him with brief nods instead of guarded stares. Trust did not grow quickly, but it grew honestly. Every shared task, every calm conversation, laid another stone on a fragile bridge. One evening, the cowboy received news that tested him deeply. A man he once rode with was badly injured and needed help far away. The road would be dangerous, and the journey long. For the first time since choosing to stay, he faced the possibility of leaving again. He spoke to her openly, explaining the situation without hiding his concern. He feared that leaving, even for a good reason, might reopen old wounds between them or with others. She listened quietly, then reminded him that care for others was part of who he was. She said leaving for the right reason was not the same as running away. With her support, he made the journey. The days apart were not easy, but they were honest. He helped his injured friend recover enough to find safety. Along the road, he reflected on how much his life had changed. He no longer felt like a man without a place. He was someone others counted on. Someone who returned. When he finally rode back, she was waiting near the hills, just as calm and steady as ever. No dramatic words were exchanged. Their shared smile said enough. Trust, once tested, had grown stronger. As seasons passed, they faced other challenges. Supplies ran short one winter. Another summer brought drought. But each difficulty was met with cooperation, rather than blame. They planned together, shared knowledge, and leaned on community. The cowboy learned more about the land through her eyes. She learned new skills from his experience on the trails. One quiet evening, they spoke again about the fear that had once defined him. He admitted that the belief about his future still lived inside him, though it no longer ruled his choices. She reminded him that life's value is not measured by certainty, but by presence. That conversation marked a gentle release of a burden he had carried for years. They did not build a life based on expectations. They built it on what was real: shared meals, long walks, silent understanding, the kind of love that does not need to announce itself. As time went on, they became known not for crossing boundaries, but for helping maintain peace. When disagreements arose, people sometimes sought their perspective. They never claimed to have answers, but they offered calm and fairness. In a land shaped by extremes, that mattered. One day, as they stood watching the horizon, the cowboy reflected on the man he once was. A man defined by size, silence, and fear of loss. That man still existed, but he no longer stood alone. He understood now that strength was not about standing apart, but about standing with someone, even when the future was unclear. The Apache woman looked out over the land she loved, feeling both pride and peace. She had not lost herself in choosing him. She had expanded her world. Together, they had created something that honored both paths without erasing either. The Wild West moved on, as it always did. Towns grew or faded. Trails shifted. Stories were told and forgotten. Their names were not written in history books, but their truth lived in the quiet spaces in shared work, mutual respect, and the courage to choose connection over fear. In the end, the cowboy understood that his worth was never tied to what he could or could not give in the future. It was found in how he showed up each day, and in a land that often took more than it gave, he had found something lasting. He held her close, not to claim or protect, but to share warmth against the wide, restless world. And that, in the vast silence of the frontier, was more than enough.